Healthcare, war powers, and the threat of a government shutdown, just a few of the many big issues facing Congress as it returns to Washington. Jesse Burns, senior editor here at The Hill, joins us to discuss. Hey, Jesse. So let's take the Venezuela issue first. The Senate is set to vote on a war powers resolution this week. They tried this in November. It failed. Only 2 Republicans voted for it. Now, with that raid that captured Maduro and his wife and questions about the possibility of further military involvement, is there any chance the dynamic in Washington has changed and that the outcome of this vote this week on a new war powers resolution could be any different?
Well, it certainly has a chance of passing right now. A couple more Republicans would have to support it, and we haven't seen that quite yet. But there are a few Republicans to watch. Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, as well as Josh Hawley from Missouri. Those are the Republicans to watch. Of course, we've already seen Rand Paul throw his support behind this. And there are some questions among some Republicans. They do want to know the administration's strategy going forward in Venezuela. Republicans at large have broadly supported the operation to remove Nicolas Maduro. But there are real questions about how the U.S. is going to remain engaged with the regime in Venezuela, if there are going to be more removals, and what the plan is to try to bring U.S. businesses, oil companies, back into Venezuela and try to get some of that oil that the president has said he wants to have access to and wants to have U.S. companies have access to. And so I think you can expect to see some Republicans continue to ask those questions going forward.
Well, you mentioned in public that the reaction to the Trump administration's actions in Venezuela has largely broken down along party lines, where Republicans have supported Democrats voicing concerns. But we have some reporting from our colleague on the Hill, Alexander Bolton, and he says that there are behind the scenes some concerns among Republicans in the Senate that the U.S. could be getting sucked in to nation building in Venezuela. How widespread do you think that concern is, and how could we see that politically manifest itself?
Yeah, and you've already seen people like Rand Paul, publicly point the finger at a colleague Lindsey Graham and saying that he's really behind the reason that Trump has really shifted his position on getting engaged in some of these foreign countries. And really, it's been a stunning shift. Trump campaigned twice on America First, and now you're seeing on the outskirts of the GOP base, some of these Republican lawmakers openly question why he has shifted to now showing a renewed interest in places like Venezuela, Colombia, Mexico, as well as trying to acquire Greenland from Denmark. And so, there are definitely these open divisions that we're seeing, and Trump trying to defend it, but at the same time, he's got 3 more years in office. And so I think the expectation is, we're only at the beginning of what he is trying to do in terms of geopolitics rather than at the end of it.
Yeah, I wonder if you think that most Republicans are kind of taking a wait-and-see approach. Like, let's see what the relationship between the Trump administration and this new government in Venezuela, how it happens and what happens, and if they can chart a positive path forward for the country.
Yeah, and we've seen Democrats, praise the fact that Maduro is now not in power. They, of course, have blasted the way that he was removed and have called it broadly illegal. But you do see these divisions. I think you're going to continue to see, Trump out there trying to rally Republicans as he did at the House GOP retreat to get behind this. We've seen a number of Trump administration officials go to Capitol Hill to try to provide more detail for the U.S. operation as well as the strategy in Venezuela. But I think you're going to see some questions from lawmakers, particularly over the role the U.S. has and how U.S. officials will be involved in that transition. The Maduro regime is very much still in control in Venezuela, even though the figurehead is now gone. The other top officials are still in power there. His deputy now being sworn in as the acting president, and it's unclear exactly when new elections will be held to try to usher in some type of replacement.
I want to ask you about the issue of Greenland. President Trump keeps bringing this up, says the U.S. needs it for national security concerns. Denmark, Greenland, the EU says the U.S. can't have it. Do you think Congress, specifically Republicans in Congress, will back Trump if he takes aggressive action against Greenland?
Well, I think you're seeing some bravado on the part of the administration where, we see people like Stephen Miller, the Deputy White House Chief of Staff, who is out there essentially boasting that no country is going to challenge the United States militarily if it tries to acquire Greenland. And of course, the White House is very confident that other countries are going to fall in line if, in fact, it makes a move. We've seen European leaders and Denmark officials warn that it would mark the end of NATO if the United States were to try to exert military force to take Greenland. But I think you're going to see largely Republicans fall in on this issue. We've seen many Republicans openly support this and voice support for the United States to do this. Some, like Thomas Massie and others, are questioning, why is this, how is this America first? But there is broadly, I think, consensus that that Greenland does play a key role in terms of the geography of the Arctic, this hemisphere, and how it could play a key role in trying to stage off Russia and Chinese interests that Trump is warning. But how that comes about, whether it's through an acquisition or something more, remains to be seen.
I want to ask you about the issue of health care. You have this discharge petition on the extension of these Affordable Care Act subsidies set for a vote this week in the House. Do you expect large numbers of Republicans to vote for that discharge petition, circumventing Republican leadership?
Well, we don't, and we've seen a handful of Republicans who have bucked the party. These are moderate Republicans who were really furious over the fact that leadership was not going along with changes for these subsidies at the end of last year. They are expected to vote for it, and because Republicans have a razor-thin margin, the bill is expected to pass the chamber. Now, we already understand it's dead on arrival in the Senate, but we would expect the Senate to take up the bill and try to make some changes to potentially get it through that chamber. Getting it through to this moment, Johnson has promised a vote in the House. This has been in the works for weeks now, so we do expect this to be one of the first legislative acts that Congress does as it reconvenes. And of course, this was the dominant issue that caused that 43-day shutdown last year. Democrats are very keen on continuing to lean into the affordability argument as well as health care heading into the midterms. Whether or not that precipitates a potential shutdown at the end of this month, that's something that Democrats aren't really talking about.
Yeah, I want to ask you about the shutdown possibility here in a second, but do you think it's a politically viable position for Republicans to take, to say, we think the subsidies perpetuate a broken system, we're not going to vote for them? Meanwhile, you have premiums skyrocketing for more than 20 million Americans.
Yeah, and you're seeing kind of the tell in the sense of the Speaker and other Republicans trying to tout, the possibility of trying to do another reconciliation bill later this year or in the first quarter even of this year, and that would largely touch on health care, it sounds like, from what we've gathered so far. And so there is this desire to have some type of political cover if Republicans are going to vote against a clean extension of these subsidies, as Democrats have been demanding for months. If Republicans are going to do that, they do want some political cover, and that would be in the form of other legislation, not this bill. And so whether that's in the Senate with changes to this to try to rein in some of those subsidies and provide some reforms, as Leader Thune has promised, or through a separate reconciliation bill, it's unclear, if both of those will happen in tandem or back to back. But you are going to see Republicans want to have some type of political cover.
You talked about the issue of a possible government shutdown. The government will run out of money at the end of January. Lawmakers have released this 3-bill minibus. It's a bipartisan package of bills. Do you take that as a sign that Democrats are not going to use the threat of a shutdown to force some kind of a concession from Republicans?
Well, it's broadly being viewed as an optimistic move to try to ward off any kind of shutdown threat. Now, you remember, 3 annual bills were already passed at the end of last year to fund, Department of Agriculture, the VA, military construction. This 3-bill package now would focus on, Department of Commerce, Energy, Interior, and it leaves some of the thornier agencies and funding fights for later, and that would be surrounding, the Department of Defense, HHS, the IRS, and so, that is still kind of hanging in the ether. But largely at this point, we would expect if this vote were to proceed, they would do some type of continuing resolution then for those remaining issues. And remember, these annual funding bills now only go through the end of September, and so even if they kind of push this along and get kind of take another bite at this funding apple, they still are going to have these looming issues here within the next number of months.
Lastly, I want to ask you before I let you go, the House is set to vote this week to override 2 of President Trump's vetoes. These are local issues. One has to do with a Native American tribe in Florida, the other with a water infrastructure project in Colorado. Do you expect them to get through Congress, and how strong of a rebuke to President Trump do you think this is?
Well, it seems like there's a chance that they could get through the House, which would itself make a remarkable rebuke of a couple of Trump's first vetoes. We've already seen Lauren Boebert from Colorado be outspokenly critical of the Trump administration over trying to tank that measure dealing with the water infrastructure project in Colorado. And so even though it might not pass the Senate, it's a very high hurdle in the Senate, try to get 20 GOP senators on board with trying to override this veto, it still would mark a symbolic rebuke of Trump in his first year back in office. We've seen more and more Republicans like Boebert. We saw Marjorie Taylor Greene, who just left Congress, and others who have been outspoken critics on particular issues. And some Republicans are getting more confident and kind of finding their footing in that criticism. So even though it doesn't have a chance necessarily of passing the full Congress, it does mark a rare moment of rebuke of this second Trump term.
All right, we will leave it at that. Jesse Burns, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.